Welcome to the Traitor, a Traitors podcast. The Traitor features deep dives into every episode of the multi-award-winning hit TV competition show, The Traitors, as well as interviews with contestants from the shows. I'm David Bloomberg, and I've been one of your hosts for Season 2 of The Traitors US. As most of you know, I've been covering reality TV for over 23 years, online, in newspapers, on my own websites, on podcasts, on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, and Twitter, and similar platforms. So basically, if there's a way I can cover it, I cover it. Today, we'll be talking about the Traitors US Season 2 reunion. So if you haven't heard the finale yet, you should definitely, go back and listen to our recap of the finale, because you're going to want to, know what happened before you get to the reunion. Matthew and I discussed on the finale recap that he unfortunately can't be here for this discussion, but I am thrilled to welcome back fan favorite of Traitors Australia Season 2, Annabelle.
Oh my God. Hey, David. Call me a low down son of a bitch and a piece of poo, but I was living for this.
I would never call you those things. I normally would call you queen, but we're talking about Sandra. So,
it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
I can't compare.
Yeah. Sorry,
It's fine.
So what's new with you?
Oh my gosh, what's new with me? It's like a million degrees here in Australia. I'm feeling emotional about the whole Traitors season wrapping up. I mean, I don't just mean this particular season. We've just had back to back to back international seasons of the Traitors, and I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Fortunately, I'm cat sitting across the road at the moment. But look, that's all I've got to fill a void.
I mean, there is U.S. Survivor, there is that, but it's not Traitors. I know this is a Traitors podcast, and yeah, it's weird that we have had all of these and they overlapped in certain cases, and then somehow your performance didn't save the show for your season. Or for your country rather.
You could only do so much, David. I know. I did a lot of heavy lifting there, but you can't carry it.
Yeah. There was a lot of dead weight in that season, and you can't carry all the dead weight. So
I mean, there was a lot of dead weight in this season of Traitors US, frankly,
yes.
But at least they were, very sassy corpses.
Yes. And yes, and that will continue. So, all right. Well, before we begin discussing the actual reunion, we, of course, need to set up the Traitor game. My guest and I will lie to one another during the podcast. The lie can be big or small about the Traitors, yourself, or anything else, as long as it is a complete fabrication. However, we are, of course, looking for fake facts, not fake opinions. Like, I can't say, gosh darn it, I wish Kate would have won. Which, would have, anyone who knows me would know that's the most obvious possible lie. Anyway, at the end of the episode, we will put our traitor hunting skills to the test and see if we can detect the other person's lie. And then we'll get really pissy that the other person lied to us, and we'll whine about it for a long... Oh, no, wait, sorry. We won't do that because we recognize this is a game. So are you ready to betray me?
I am so ready, David.
All right, so we start off with Andy Cohen introducing the everybody but the final four and Max, who I forgot was on the season, to the reunion. And as this happens, he goes through and, just one by one, and we don't need to recap all of that. And that's the other thing. And through this reunion, I just want to make it clear, we're not going to recap every single word that he says, because a lot of his questions, whether they were from him or from people who wrote in, they were stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the problem with Andy Cohen, right? Like, he loves the Housewives. He will watch the Housewives. But if he does not like the show, he will just straight up not watch it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how many below deck reunions have we had where he just blatantly refuses to engage? Also, is it just me, or does he have slight, and by slight, I mean very intense evil energy? He gives me, okay, controversial, he gives me Epstein vibes.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
Wow, that is controversial. Look at this right off the top. I don't know. I don't get that off of him, but you
He's
know,
very ick.
Maybe my Traitors isn't working.
Allegedly, allegedly. This
Yes.
is just me giving an opinion.
Okay.
I find him ick.
Yes. Um, so and like I said, he welcomed the cast, not very interesting. The cast had not seen the finale and supposedly didn't know what happened. I read elsewhere that there were players who truly did not know what happened. And we got, in an interview with producers that I read, I did find out why we don't get the clips like we do on some of the other country shows of the people being eliminated, finding out who the traitors are and stuff like that. And it's because he said they didn't want to risk anything spreading. Now, my personal opinion is that has something to do with something I've discussed here previously, which was call it deep traitor's throat, told me a little tidbit from season 1 that after the first person was murdered on season 1, that person whose name is suddenly escaping me. Also, he was on Shaws of Sunset, like MJ, but I just
Oh, yeah. I love
can't
him.
remember
Yeah.
his name.
No, I neither.
And they for some reason they hadn't done like media photos and stuff, so he was brought back for pictures, and Suri apologized to him, and then he started telling other people Suri's a traitor. But Suri is so good that no one believed him, even when he was saying this.
Phaedra could never. I'm sorry. Like, this gets me fired up, right? Like, you've got all these people screeching about how it's so unfair. Dan blew up her game. Okay, I've already, like, ranted into the universe about how this is a load of crap. Every season, traders blow up someone's game. They have to bounce back from that.
Yep.
Also, even if he'd never brought up her name, she did so little and was playing such a Dan, I'm not going to say anything game. People would have come for her. Anyway, all that aside, I'm sorry. Somebody who legitimately knew and had confirmed Suri was a traitor, leaked it to the rest of the cast who are still in the game, and Suri still bounced back from that.
That's what my sources tell me, yes.
Literally, Suri would eat Phaedra alive.
So I do think that may be why they weren't doing this time. Of course, that could have been solved just by keeping them separate. But hey, anyway, as we move into this here, they watch a kind of shortened version of the finale, and we see some reactions. Wasn't really interesting, but then they start talking, and Larsa comes up with this brilliant revelation, because she says the gamers play the game differently. And then she also says that the Bravo type people, she calls them the other reality TV people, they just want to be there to be on TV and have fun. But the gamers, at the end, they'll do anything to win. Yeah, that's why they're gamers. They are playing the game. It's this, if you're upset, or any of them are upset that they just came to be on TV, that's a you problem. This is a game. It is competitive reality TV. So I don't know what point she thought she was making, because whatever it was, I feel like she undercut herself.
Yeah, so it was the way she said it that they will do whatever it takes
Right.
to win, kind of spoke to this underlying resentment and issue that a lot of the Bravo Lebs were
Yeah.
taking with the Trishelle and CT victory and how Dan had played the
Hmm.
game as well, where they were bitter that these people had actually participated in the game and
Right.
played the game and lied and done what it takes. And they kind of touched on it, I think, at the end of the show. I can't remember who said it, but someone said, I think there's a cultural difference
Yes.
between the gamers and the Bravo Labs.
I think that was actually Andy who ends up saying that.
Oh my God, look at Andy. He's having a brainwave.
Yeah.
Um, the
Yeah,
and that,
Andy at the end says it's a cultural difference between the people who come from the gaming shows and the others. Now, when I was still live tweeting this in the between trying to take notes and trying to take video, I said the same thing. So I think in my world, Andy saw what I tweeted and then, it back in
yes.
time, he then said, "Oh, this is good. I'm going to use this." So, but I
But
mean,
yes. That
yeah.
was kind of the context or the world
Hmm.
frame through which this entire reunion show took place and explains, I think, a lot of what was going on. But I disagree insofar as, like, you have someone like Peter who comes from a dating show
Hmm.
who turned up and was excited to play a game. So I really do think that we can differentiate between people who were purely there to
Right.
be on television and had no interest in anything else, and then the people who turned up and were actually excited to play a competition reality show.
Yeah, he was excited. He was terrible at it, but he was excited to play. So, but at least, he was, I guess at least he was trying.
Oh, David,
Uh,
I'm a Peter's Pals apologist. I don't know if you know
oh,
this about
I
me,
did
but
not know.
I'm a Peter Pals
Yes.
apologist.
Uh-oh.
I mean, I do agree that the execution in many, many ways was poor, but
Yes.
I'm actually really excited to see if this concept of a large group of very vocal, aggressive traitor hunters
Hmm.
can stick in a show where previously we've thought only by playing dead and kissing ass can you
Hmm.
make it to the end as a faithful. Like, at the end of the day, David, if there's 5 6 of you, they can't kill all of you.
Right. His
Someone's gonna
problem,
last.
his
Yeah.
main problem was playing a game like that with a known minority.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
there was so many issues. Don't get
yeah,
me wrong.
yeah,
There's so
oh
many
yeah,
issues, but I
yeah.
actually loved Peter on the show.
Well, I can tell you I did not. However, I loved making fun of Peter in my various TikToks and things like that, and other people mostly loved it too. So I'm going with that.
Oh,
So
everyone loves hating on Peter.
yes,
I know that I am on an island of my own on this one.
yes. Is there a windmill on that island? That is what we need to know.
Oh, obsessed.
But so after that, the final four are brought in. As CT and Trishelle are talking, MJ interjects with some sore loser nonsense about them manipulating, bamboozling, grifting, etc. And this is going to continue. This is the theme of the episode, is MJ whining. And I will say, however much we discuss it here in the next however long we're on, I saw an interview with Sandra from Dalton Ross, where she said they were there for 3 hours and it was just continuous. So they probably cut a lot of MJ, maybe 2 hours of it was MJ whining. That's me, not Sandra. So they pretty much just brushed through that for now.
I mean, I was listening to the Trishelle exit interview, and
Mhm.
apparently, yeah, like every time Trishelle was talking, MJ was calling her a B word. Yeah, like it was. And don't get me wrong, I can be a bit of Betty. I can hold a
Mhm.
grudge. I would love to say I'm a great sport. I'm not always a great sport, but there is a difference between like knowing that you shouldn't be holding a grudge and it's a
Right.
game, but you're secretly holding a grudge, and literally embarrassingly for yourself
Yes.
trying to say that participating in this game makes you a fundamentally horrible person,
Mhm.
and then going off like this in such a personal way. It was ick.
Yes. Oh, yes. It was. Yeah, and we haven't even gotten to most of it yet.
No, no.
So they switched to Kate. She says that she was okay losing because she didn't feel like coming in halfway through and as a late recruit that it would be right for her to win. So, hey, something I agree with Kate about.
Yeah.
You know, she's
I
right.
mean, I couldn't. And exactly. I think I said with Chili Philly that I wanted Trishelle to take part in the win. I thought she played the game with a lot of
Mhm.
agency. We've never really seen such an active traitor hunter get to the end and win. And even though I'll never ever forgive her for the Peppermint vote,
Yes.
you know, that was a satisfying ending for me. If
Hmm.
Kate had swooped in at the end, having really just sat around and
Hmm.
said, "Tell me what to do" for half the show, I don't think that was going to be
No,
satisfying for any of us.
no, no. Then after that, guess what? MJ gets pissy again. She says that if Trishelle thought CT was a traitor, she should have voted that way again. But MJ didn't vote for CT in the revote, so it just would have been another tie. So her
Literally.
her brain isn't braining there. It's not.
Oh,
It makes zero sense. Um, but and Trishelle already explained why she did it, and we'll get to more of that later. But CT tried to be nice to Trishelle and the other non-gamers by complimenting them and even, saying she did a good job. And she just fires back saying he should have finished it the right way. And you know what? The more she acts this way, the more I feel he did finish it the right way.
I know.
But he is really being the bigger person here. He's not taking the bait. He is not going to fight with her, which probably the Bravo Lebs are not used to. They're used to if they come at someone's coming back at them. And so she's just throwing it all, and CT's like a wall. He is not getting involved in her drama here.
Did it not feel to you like there were about five sane people in that room and that
Mm-hmm.
everybody else was just hamming drama for the cameras, doing whatever they could to stay relevant,
Yes.
stay talked about? And, like you could see, and Andy even brought it up at the beginning, that Dan was nervous walking into that room
Yeah.
as a relatively well balanced human being,
Yes.
knowing he was about to get trapped in a room of crazies.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I mean, yes, who would have thought John would be one of the sane ones?
And even John was like, he was being a lot.
He
He
was a lot, but
was,
he was a lot in
yes,
a sane way, I would say,
yeah, yeah.
Um, so now continuing here, Trishelle says Phaedra was one of her favorites and Tamra too. And then we moved to Andy making fun of Kevin not being able to pronounce Parvati's name, which is about the only time we see Kevin that I remember.
Yeah.
I
Can
mean,
we
and
talk about
that's
the outfits? We need to, now you're on Kevin. I'm sorry. I know you
yeah.
probably don't want to talk about the outfits, David, but I want to talk about the outfits for a
Which
moment.
outfits?
So I don't know if you've seen the Hunger Games franchise,
I
but a
have.
lot of them looked like they were dressed for the Pan Am
Oh, the
Hunger Games
overall. Yes, the
kickoff.
overall.
Yeah. We had Deontay, who had that massive situation on his shoulders. We had Parvati. We had Phaedra. Like everyone, there was a sort of juxtaposition between people who came out in full Pan Am couture
Mhm.
versus people who were just in this sort of basic black tie formal. And I was living for it. Kevin, though, Kevin's what I was like, what is with that hair? It was like he'd stuck his
Oh,
finger in an
yes.
electrical socket.
Yes, yes. But, maybe that's why we only saw him the once. They had to rush him
I
to the
think
ER,
so. I think
Um,
so.
Next up, Phaedra discusses her relationship with CT, including that she apparently thought he was the car mechanic at first because their car kept breaking down and he was helping to fix it. I don't know if this is a true story or not, but it's hysterical.
Oh,
CT credits Phaedra with keeping him around in the game, which, yeah, she did. I mean, that's one way you stick around is you become friends with the traitors. Um, this leads to a question for Ekin-Su about whether anyone in the castle caught her eye.
Oh.
Yes, they chuckle, but she avoids answering. However, John and Tamra fill in some gaps when it comes to Peter. Yet the two of them insist they're just really good friends. Sure, they are. Okay.
Oh,
I
I'll
guess
tell you
we'll.
what, David. Like, there was one thing catching my eye this whole episode. And it
Mhm,
was just like unfortunate that Trishelle won. So we kept cutting to Trishelle
mhm.
because the giant eye-catching Ekin-Su bazumbas that was sitting right next to her face. I was like, oh, Ekin-Su turned up tonight. But yeah, Ekin-Su and Peter are trying to insist they're just friends. Everyone on the cast basically has a separate piece of evidence
Mhm.
pointing out that they're clearly together. It was very much Dan denying he's a traitor all over again.
Yes, yes. Now, of course, Ekin-Su basically, for those who may not know, she basically left the Traitors reunion, hopped on a flight, and went to Celebrity Big Brother in the UK. So,
Also, isn't she the one who, when she was asked in the interview who she would most likely to see on the next season of Celebrity Traitors, said Donald Trump? Like, I think
yes,
Ekin-Su's a little bit unhinged. I like love
yeah,
her,
and
but crazy energy.
I had forgotten that, but yes, that was the reason that I was rooting for her to be poisoned in the game. In the game, let me clarify, in the game. Um,
Oh, that
so
is a truly cursed couple. Like, honestly,
yes,
not Ekin-Su, Peter, please.
yes, yeah. Um, Next up, Johnny Bananas is still whining about being murdered first by Dan. Dan
Oh,
gives, yes. I see. This is where I wish we were a video podcast so you could see Annabelle's face in some of these situations. The eye roll, the whole head eye roll was just amazing there. So you'll just have to take my word for it. But, Dan gives rational reasons for doing it. Bananas doesn't want to hear it, which is fine. I don't want to hear anything more from Bananas. So,
oh my
uh,
God.
I mean,
Stop giving Bananas airtime. He's so dark. Like, it's this, he's a one note pony. It's all like me, me, me. I'm
yes.
amazing. I'm God's gift to humanity. And everyone who disagrees sucks. And we just see him over and over and over again. And I'm like, buddy, you were first boot. Stop trying the absolute hardest to come back. I swear, if they bring him back next season and not Peppermint, I'm going to
Mhm.
be popping off harder than MJ.
Yeah. Yeah, I have heard rumors. Now they're rumors, they're Twitter rumors, so they mean approximately zero. I hope
Yeah.
they don't bring Bananas back. But the funny thing, I mentioned this before. He had come pretty much straight from House of Villains, where he gave away the win, and then to get knocked out first. I think some of his anger is probably self-directed at that point, but he pushes it off onto Dan instead. Uh,
Ugh.
So Parvati's face is the next topic of discussion, and that's really hard to replicate on an audio podcast. But if you've seen Parvati face, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, you are doing a very good impersonation. As far as the listeners know, I'm doing a good impersonation too. But
David's nailing it, let me assure you.
um,
I've
so
actually started doing it at work. I have to say, it's like, I think all of the posts on Twitter have slowly seeped into
yeah.
my brain where at like various points I'll find myself like mincing around the office,
Mhm.
pulling a Parv face. And I don't know, it brings me joy. No one else gets
Yes,
it.
right, right. Uh, Next up is Deontay, another person who I'd forgotten was ever on the show. He talks about how he released some childhood trauma, and Phaedra was a great support to him.
I really
Okay.
liked this bit. To be honest, I mean, I know that this is probably not your kind of thing, David, these moments, but I was very nervous coming into the Traitors. I have
Mhm.
post-traumatic stress disorder and thought, oh no, being in a simulated
Yes.
murder scenario is going to be a complete nightmare for me. But there was something strangely cathartic about my trauma responses serving me quite well in that scenario. That was soothing, and I think for Deontay said like all the money in the world and all the experience I have hasn't been able to give me the closure that this gave me, and I was really happy for him, and I'm really glad he put himself first and removed himself from that situation as well, which is that's a brave move to make.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fine. It was just, okay, there he is, and then it's gone, and that's the last we see of him the whole time, okay. Andy then asks why Kate wanted to come back after she'd been so desperate to leave last time, which is actually a rare good question from him. She says a lot has changed, including having a baby, so now she could come and actually get a good night's sleep each night.
Which was funny and on brand. And I mean, this is what I've been kind of whinging about with Kate this whole season. And as a Below Deck fan, I've seen a lot of Kate. And Kate's whole shtick is, I don't want to be here. I don't care. I hate everything. I'm just going to sit in my shades and have a drink in the corner. Which, okay, babe, then why have you done like 20 seasons of Below Deck where this is literally your whole job if you hate it so much? So I don't think she does hate it, but hating it is kind of her vibe. And then saying, the only reason I want to be here is so I can get away from my kid and get a good night's sleep. And it's like, okay, Kate. And look, fortunately, she's one of the few people who lands this shtick quite well. A lot of people have come back to Survivor and tried to be a Courtney Yates and not pulled it off.
Right.
We had a Below Deck person on my season who really tried to pull off a Kate and it just fell completely flat. So I think... I'm a bit over it personally. Yes. David, I don't need to see more I don't want to be here Kate anymore, but
I don't need to see more fine. Kate, period, anymore.
No,
she had, Matthew and I discussed it on the finale recap. She had some moments this season where she was, a few shining moments where she did the right thing, and then she went back to not. And as a matter of fact, it doesn't help. And this is a bit of a rerun for people who heard the finale recap, so I'll keep it very short. Her decisions helped cost Sandra the game.
Yes.
In her bad decision of murdering Sheree the final night helped get Sandra out. So
yes.
For that there is no forgiveness.
And this is a problem I think that reality TV casting has quite a bit, where we have a fan favorite who they want to bring back because they're a fan favorite, but ultimately they know, casting knows, we know that person is a very one-note pony. And if they aren't able to come back and bring something a bit different and interesting and original, then it's never going to have the payoff.
Right. I mean, some people did say they loved seeing her back, but I obviously was not one of them.
No, good for them.
Yeah. We move on to Peppermint, who talks about how she's a huge Traitors fan and thought this would be great, as well as a good opportunity. So it was sad to be cast out right away, and especially with no proof. She said people rely on the biases they bring in those situations, which end up targeting the person who's most different in the group. People like her don't fare that well, and it reminded her of being the only out person in high school. She's clearly still emotional about it, with good reason, and says, the moment was bigger than just her coming to play a game. Most people don't know a trans person in their real life, so they learn from TV, and she was heartbroken to not be able to show them more.
This part made me emotional. I cried a little bit here, even though I'd already seen the clip online. Peppermint is a Black trans woman. We don't get to see Black trans women on TV very often, and losing her first over something as ridiculous as her like telling Trishelle that her outfit was better than Trishelle's or something was just so sad and disappointing. And I thought that speech she gave was really powerful. And hit in a way that, again, like MJ's hurt just didn't. Like, I felt the way that she put that speech together was really moving. She deserved so much more. She's the
Yes.
only person from this cast that I want desperately to see again with newbies. And as I said earlier, I will be furious if Bananas gets that spot over her.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she deserves it, obviously. And, I did see in Mike Bloom's interview with Trishelle and CT that Trishelle had said something like, after hearing that, I will think about the way I act and the assumptions that I make and things like that. I'm not doing a very good job summarizing it because I saw it just before the podcast. But yes, it was something to that effect. So hopefully, at the very least, it was a learning experience for Trishelle. But it could have been more.
And I mean, look, good on Trishelle, because I wanted to slap John in this moment. John decides that this is the perfect time for him to jump in and try and make excuses for himself for having voted out Peppermint first, and starts giving her a bunch of tips on how she could have played the game better. And she's just like, whatever, John. I mean, Dan kind of snaps at John for doing the same thing to him later. But it's just like, John, shut up. No one, and I'm just like, say this as well. I don't need my castmates to give me tips on how I could have done better, right? I've got the self-awareness to know where I went wrong.
That's what podcasters are for. We're here to tell them what they could have done better.
Literally, and especially coming from someone whose opinion they probably don't respect.
Right.
Like, John, shut up. Shut up.
Yeah. He gets good later, but in this case, yes, totally agreed. So we move on from that. We see the Peter banishment again. And then he tells Phaedra he respects her as a competitor, but has the question, will she accept this rose? And he pulls out a rose. They hug. I barf.
Yeah, the Peter's Pal montage of every scene of them kicking people out of the room just had me in stitches. And this is where I think the Peter Pals, one of the major F-ups of the Peter Pals was the us and them dynamic they created in the house. But that there were a lot of clips, like what do you call them? Clips that we saw, some of them up to 3 times.
I fast forwarded through most of them. Yeah.
Oh, it was that was killing me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have complained before about after shows, whether it's the Traitors postmortem or the Traitors Uncloaked in the UK. Like, they're literally after shows and they show clips of what just happened. Like, you don't need, my memory is not that of a goldfish. I remember what happened 10 minutes ago. At least, okay, I can see for some memorable clip, but there were far too many clips in this show.
I don't mind a bit of flashback material. Right. I mean, I'd forgotten everything from the first half of the season, but this show without ads went on for an hour and 10 minutes. It could have been a snappy 40.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that was an hour and 10 minutes the way you watched it. I watched it. Well, we both watched it taking notes, obviously, but, I watched it taking notes, trying to tweet and capturing video for TikTok. So it took a solid 2 hours plus for me. And it was dragging. It was really dragging. Anyway, continuing with Peter and Phaedra. Phaedra says she likes Peter, but he could be a cult leader. He's good looking, charismatic, and could convince people. And I barf again. But I mean, she's also right in that case. Sandra and Parvati are asked what they thought when they saw each other, and both say they weren't happy. But thankfully, Peppermint squashed their beef. We have heard about that before, so this is not breaking news. This is like the 4th time I've heard it told.
Yeah, the power of Peppermint.
Yes. Similar question to Janelle and Dan, but they knew each other well, and they were happy to see each other. Janelle says she would have been a way better traitor than Dan. Now, while I acknowledge it would have been hard to be worse than Dan in that regard, I'm not sure she would have been much better. I mean, there was suspicion on her, and she wasn't even a traitor.
I know. Look, I think it would be almost impossible to be as bad as Dan was.
Yes. You would have to try.
Yeah, I would have. I'd have picked Sandra over her in a
Mm-hmm.
heartbeat. I'd have picked Peppermint over Janelle in a heartbeat. I'd have picked, yeah, pretty much anyone other than Janelle. I enjoyed Janelle in the faithful role. I enjoyed watching her go around and rally votes and cast suspicion. And like, some people are just fun to watch
Right.
in that, huntress position, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought she was one of them. I didn't need her to win. I needed her there to stir the pot.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of Sandra, as you just did, we moved to her. Some people had their eyes on her, but others felt she was a faithful because of how pissed she was that she wasn't picked to be a traitor. And she echoes that she really wanted to be one. She's asked why she went after faithfuls, even though she knew who the traitors were. And this is where basically, like, reality TV people, listen to Sandra. She is giving you a free lesson here. She said 18 or so people had to go, whether they were faithful or traitors, for her to get to the end. Exactly. I mean, this is something that I preach almost every podcast. Don't listen to the host. The host is saying you must get the traitors. No, you don't. You must get to the end and win the game. Getting the traitors is one way to do it, but if you do too much, you just get new traitors being pulled in there and you have no clue who they are.
Yeah, so the traitors, I call this the traitors pet strategy.
Mm-hmm.
She called them her traitor angels.
Yes.
Um, and has been kind of a tried and tested
Right.
faithful strategy now across quite a lot of seasons. And this is the first time that the show has really let someone articulate it on the show.
Yeah.
So that was really satisfying to watch. And it was something that she did really well. I think there's still a lot of limitations with the traitors pet strategy.
Oh, yeah.
Because being able, and I think Sandra was a really good example of this, where you can get to the end, but because of the murder situation and because of the people you have to sacrifice along the way, being able to get to the end, keeping your traitor there, being that traitor's number one, and being surrounded by people who aren't going to suspect you as a traitor is nigh on impossible. And I think because all we have seen, the only strategic game before this season that we had seen from a faithful really is the traitors pet strategy.
Okay, I was going to say Matthew doesn't like spoilers on here, so before you said anything of a specific...
I just mean traitors pets.
Okay,
so
yes.
I don't think that anyone has really worked out a strategic play outside of the traitors pet strategy.
Yes.
But this is why I am so high on the Peter's Pals experiment, because I think, like, we've seen individual traitor hunters and,
Right.
prime case example, like, they get cut. The idea that if you could get enough of you together to boom, 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 bombard, I don't know, like, I'm not sure that it's necessarily great, but I'd like to see it simulated and played out perhaps a few times in online versions to see if there is another way of playing this game that can get you to the end that doesn't just involve kissing traitor ass.
I mean, it is interesting because Matthew and I discussed, like, people are asking, how did Trishelle get this far? Well, Trishelle got that far in part because of either having a shield or being suspected of having a shield, and in part because other times that her name came up, there was always someone above her who was more of a threat.
Yes.
So it's the tall poppy effect. The tallest plant gets cut down. And
Like,
so
if you could be the most likable person in a group of 6 relentless, cutthroat faithful, like, I think that's an alternative to being a traitor's pet.
Now, the problem is, once you start getting a group that big, how you are not infiltrated by traitors. Peter's Pals kept it small enough that they all felt that they knew they weren't infiltrated by traitors. But quite honestly, if Peter had played the right way, they would have been infiltrated by traitors by Peter, because he should have said yes to the recruitment.
Yes.
So that's a big part of the problem is a good traitor would infiltrate a most faithful of the faithfuls group. So you've got all these, competing strategies going on there.
Yes.
And But what you're saying is interesting. If you just get a large enough group, it's kind of like why animals travel in herds or, fish swim in schools. Yes, a couple of us are going to get picked off, but someone's going to survive. The problem is this isn't it isn't a group game, even though some people like Peter treated it like it was. It's not one or a couple people win. So if you're not one of them, okay, then you were just meat for the lion because you were in the herd of buffalo. So
I agree. And it's
yeah,
a thought experiment rather
right,
than this is what I would put my stamp on as the way to
right.
do it. I
Mm-hmm.
still think the traitor's pet strategy is the more self-interested thing to do.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
that Trishelle has won this game, exercising
Mm-hmm.
so much agency is impressive. And I would like this game will become boring, and this was I think the
Mm-hmm.
part of the flaw of this season is so many people in the second half got there by playing dead. So Phaedra's up in Traitors Tower playing dead, Sandra's strategically playing dead, the housewives are non-strategically playing dead, and so if it wasn't for the Peter pals, frankly, it would have been unwatchable. Nothing would be going on.
Yeah.
So I think that the idea that there are ways to play this game that don't involve doing absolutely nothing until the
Mm-hmm.
last episode is something that I want to explore and what I would like to see from the show.
Yeah. And I mean, it's probably one reason that uh, you know, some people like this version where they put in the non-gamers because they know the non-gamers are going to stir things up, cause drama, whether or not there's actual gameplay.
Yeah.
Personally, I watch for the gaming aspect, which is
Yeah.
why, like the other versions, the other countries' versions have been better in that regard, other than, Suri winning season one in the US. So, although, like your season, I don't know, the better is the word. Once, spoiler alert, once you were gone, um, and then it was just a bunch of people way worse than any of the housewives in term,
Yeah.
even Sheree, even worse than Sheree in terms of playing the game.
Yeah.
So, um,
I I have no words to defend.
yeah. All right. Well, we move on to Marcus and Larsa. They are asked if they were worried about being targeted because they came in as a couple. Marcus agrees that they figured one would go quickly, and Larsa says they were too vocal. Andy then asks the real question people want to know, which is what their status is now. Marcus says they hit a speed bump, but they're fine now, and Larsa says they're communicating better. So, aw.
Yeah, this was odd. So obviously, everyone had sort of seen in the leaks that they were sitting next to each other. And so that was a little bit of a scandal because they had broken up post show. But they said that they were communicating better and they called it a speed bump. Did they explicitly say they're back together? At no point did I hear the words, we're back together.
That was implied,
It was heavily implied.
but they did not specifically say it, which is very traitorous behavior.
Yeah, I want to hear more about the drama. I want to hear what
Yeah.
actually went down. And from what I heard, I'm a big Nick Idanza stan. He gave a full
Mm-hmm.
breakdown on the housewives' backstories. Larsa, very smothering and codependent in a relationship. So I don't know. I want to know what happened.
Yes, the big interest to me, as people may remember, is that of course Marcus is Michael Jordan's son, and Larsa is Scottie Pippen's ex-wife, and of course, being a huge fan of those Chicago Bulls, that makes it more interesting to me. But yeah, you're right. It was a non-answer, much like the one Kate gave when CT asked her in the car on the way back from the mission, like, are you a traitor? And she never said no. She just deflected several times, and CT didn't seem to notice that, much like I didn't notice that they didn't say yes or no here. So
Hmm.
the traitors fooled me.
I don't know. Oh, we'll watch this space. We're here for the
Yes,
drama.
yes. Um, Andy asks about comments made regarding the housewives not being good at playing the game. Who knew you'd be brought up on the reunion?
Oh, the way the Housewives fans dragged me for filth over that one, David. But I don't take it back. They aren't good at playing the game.
I've said the same thing. So, but Dan retracts what he said about Phaedra, and Parvati says she stands by Phaedra being a good performer because she was. Now, note that in this discussion, it started about the housewives not being good, but then they only talk about Phaedra after that. Why? Because she's the only example of any of them playing well. And even she had issues, She was the only Bravo person playing the game. And at the end, she even admitted she was playing for fun, not strategy. I mean, some of her decisions were made based on feels or what would be enjoyable. That's even why she picked Kate as to give the final ultimatum to.
Phaedra did literally everything she could to avoid playing this game.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying she was bad TV because she wasn't.
Right.
She had a lot of good TV moments. She coined Peter's Pals, which will live on forever. But she did not want to play that game. She was doing the bare minimum, less than the bare minimum often. And it really wasn't until she was the only traitor left and she was forced to make a decision that she did anything at all. So of course she was the only one to talk about because all of the others were never put in that position.
Right. Yeah. And what's interesting is the one time she did stand up and say, here's the person that I want to murder, it was Tamra, her own fellow housewife. And
madness.
And, we'll get to that in a bit because seems to me that Tamra should be very angry with her, but much like Phaedra is very angry. But Tamra, as a matter of fact, I say we'll get to that in a minute. It's right here. Tamra was initially pissed to find out that she'd been murdered by Phaedra, who clarified that it wasn't because she liked Tamra the least, but rather that Tamra had been telling people how smart Phaedra was. Tamra said it was hard to vote for Phaedra because she preys on everyone. Now, when I heard this, she meant it as P-R-A-Y, praise, like literally saying, God bless you individually to them. I thought she meant P-R-E-Y, like she preys on them, like she's the predator.
I thought the same thing.
Yes.
And I was confused because I wasn't sure if it was a cultural difference. Like here in Australia, it's not a very overtly religious country. Most people kind of like religion is something you do in private. You certainly would not go around like blessing people or sending God's goodwill to them or whatever it is that people do. I don't know. That's just not something we do here. So when she said she preys on people, I was, oh, she is asking for it. This is worse than when Kevin told us that she's got a wonky eye.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, she was preying on people, P-R-E-Y. They just didn't know it at the time. And so, but yes, I mean, it comes up again later. Apparently she was walking around preying on with whatever people. And so, if she was doing it as a strategy and it helped her, hey, whatever. But
I think it worked for people. They thought, she's a good Christian lady.
Yeah.
She's giving me God's blessing, so she can't be. I honestly lack the understanding or empathy for that cultural context to be able to find that anything other than extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah. It would absolutely be extremely uncomfortable if, other people were there, especially, maybe people who weren't Christian. But if it helped her in the game, if she was doing it as a game move, more power to her. I don't think she was, but if she was, then fine.
I mean, we know God does not love Dan.
Yes. But God definitely takes a big interest in reality TV shows. We know
he
that.
does.
Yes,
we do. We've heard it many times.
Yes. Now, Since Peter was a faithful to the end, what would he have done if Phaedra had given him the ultimatum instead of Kate? Which appears to answer one question that we had, which was they tried to recruit him, he turned them down. Can they give him the ultimatum, or is he blocked now once he turned them down? Apparently, given that they asked this question, the answer is no, they could have given it to him, or else just nobody told Andy that they couldn't.
Yeah.
He correctly says Phaedra should have done that because she could have then thrown him under the bus and gained credibility. And yeah, we were saying that at the time. Yes, go with it. Why are you going with Kate? Again, she did it for the lols. And so unfortunately, he wasn't asked about his stupid decision to not accept recruitment to begin with. That is where the real question should have been. Like, why were you so dumb that you didn't accept recruitment?
Oh, Peter's ego, it knows no bounds. Yeah, look, again, there's no point asking Phaedra these questions because, as you say, everything Phaedra did, she did because she felt like it at the time. There was no strategy or thought behind it. Which is why I think it should hurt more for people like Tamara who were murdered by her because, and this is why I think it's more hurtful, right? When one of them does something than when a gamer does it. When a gamer does it, at least you know that there was a strategic reason for it and it wasn't personal. With Phaedra, it's always strictly personal.
Yeah, and she even says right after that, she kept around the people she liked. And this is what we mean when when we say she wasn't necessarily being strategic in her decisions. And so, yeah, you raise a good point. Some of the housewives, including her and MJ, I know MJ isn't technically a housewife, but, they got all pissed off because of game moves that were made. And yet, what about when she murdered Tamra? I think Tamra should be more pissed off than Phaedra is.
I mean, they literally murdered Kevin and John because they didn't like them. That was the explicit reason they gave.
Yeah. John had used up his words in the house. So, yeah. So then we, again, going with Peter, he's asked why he tried getting Phaedra and Parvati to work with him. And he says it was the same as others. He believed they were traitors and wanted to cover himself, but he was more vocal with it. Gee, you think? Really, Peter?
Yeah.
I mean, he thinks that he was doing the same strategy, but he wasn't. The other people were quietly aligning themselves with the traitors. He was loudly accusing them and then turning around and going and saying, let's be friends, which was just so obvious what he was doing.
He didn't realize until halfway through that you have to play traitor's pet to some degree.
Yeah.
Right? The horse had long bolted by then. It was way too late.
Yes.
I mean, what he did made sense, and calling him a traitor for doing it was bizarre.
Right.
But, and because I'm a Peter truther, he was having a go. He just totally lacked finesse.
Yes. And that's the interesting thing is on the Traitors postmortem, and I talked about this on the podcast and I also did TikTok on it. He said, I had no idea about the Traitors coming into this.
Yeah, that was bizarre, wasn't it?
And then in his post-game interviews, he claimed he had watched season 1. And it's like,
really?
Okay, you're lying somewhere here. And I suspect it's now. Because I feel like in postmortem was right after the fact. And so for him to then say it in interviews afterwards, he probably didn't realize that the postmortem interview was being used and figured.
I think it's more impressive if he had less familiarity with the show. I'd seen mixed things as well, where it was like, did he watch season? He certainly hadn't seen any of the Traitors except season 1, or had he seen nothing at all? But the fact that he came up with that Shield's ploy with Burgerlicious, and a lot of the things that he did, even though again it lacked finesse, the fact that he had those strategic ideas without ripping them off from another version of the show, I actually think is really impressive. Peter's one of those people who I give it a few years, but I wouldn't mind him seeing come back with returnees, because I think while he didn't kind of have the skills to pull off the moves, the fact that he was thinking of them was so much more than 80% of this cast did.
Yeah, I'll grant you that. It's just that people keep, and he especially, but other people too, keep crediting him. It's, I pulled off this awesome Shield move. No, Dan was stupid.
Yeah.
Okay?
No, I agree. There's no way it should have worked.
Yeah, and Sandra even said that at one point. I don't remember if I took a note on it, but Sandra was like, no, Dan should have just, gotten rid of someone else. There was no reason to do that. Yeah, Dan was dumb. Dan fell for it. Everyone else saw what Peter was doing, but yet when it happened, Peter's like, I am the master of this game. And his head got so big. I think that is really where he absolutely lost at that point, because he thought he was so brilliant, he could do anything and get away with it. Yeah,
and I think, yes, and and this is why I push back on Phaedra saying he'd make a good cult leader. I think and this is a curse a lot of attractive white men suffer from, where they so easily develop a bit of a god complex, but in a really socially off-putting way. So he might have had a few devout followers, but he was so off-putting to the majority of the house because of that holier than thou.
Well, you only need a few for a cult. I mean, that's kind of the definition of a cult, is a small percentage.
Yeah, but people, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think he's got the charisma or the charm.
Yeah. I mean, and certainly being the Bachelor on The Bachelor contributes to the God complex. When you have a whole bunch of women competing for your attention, that has to contribute to that complex.
Yeah.
So
we've seen many, many men fall victim to it.
Yes.
Rest in peace.
Yeah. All right. Next up, they discuss a bunch of Alan's outfits. This is an audio podcast. There isn't a whole lot we can say about them, that hasn't been said already through the whole time of the show. So we'll move on. And it's time to focus on the actual traitors. At the end of this discussion, Kate gives a piece of advice to future traitors. Hope that there aren't a lot of faithfuls you actually care about. She adds that she should have been a traitor last year, which does actually make me chuckle.
Yes.
The thing is, though, she's just admitting she couldn't put her feelings aside for the sake of the game. Other winning traitors have done that. I'm not going to list them because I don't want to get yelled at for spoilers. But, watch all the seasons on Peacock and you'll see, that are now or coming to Peacock. And you'll see some other traitors who have done that. But we can at least point to Cirie. Cirie was a key example of that. Yes, she knew the emotions that were involved with the two other people that, that she was bringing along. And she still did it because it's a game.
Yeah.
Dan is asked about his strategy, and he talks about leaning into being chill and quiet. He wanted to build trust, but admits it backfired. Sandra says a lot of them weren't onto Phaedra till Dan went after her. And this is where the Phaedra blow up starts. She says Dan is a, quote, low down son of a bitch. And she adds a piece of shit. So yikes. That was all I could think of.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
It was so much. And Dan was so sane and respectful.
Yes.
The only time he kind of lost his cool is he's trying to, explain it's a game and I respect you. And bloody John jumps in to try and tell Dan where he went wrong. And Dan's like, I know what mistakes I made. That wasn't the question, John.
Yes. And Dan responds to Phaedra and says, he plays these as games and will never give up. He'll take a huge shot when his back's against the wall. And until now, it's worked. I've seen some people saying, "Oh, really? It worked? You lost that. You lost that second season. You came in second place." And it's like, yeah, that's not what he was talking about. He wasn't saying the game overall. It was, the Dan's funeral type of thing. His back was against the wall, and he survived that aspect of it. He
Yeah.
says a lot of the cast has gone after each other on a personal level, but when the game is over, he shakes hands. He likes
Yeah.
Phaedra. He doesn't regret going after her because he didn't feel he could win if she were still in the game. She was well insulated and well liked. Phaedra says he doesn't have a point. But no, Phaedra, you're wrong. He does have a point. And I don't even think she was listening to what he said because she's still so angry at him. She focuses on him previously saying he wanted her out. And yeah, he did. He admitted that. And then she calls him more names again.
Yeah, and you could see he was confused, and I don't blame him. Where he's trying to say, look, it's hard for me to tell really if she's just doing this for TV and we're
Right.
actually going to be fine after all of this, or if she's genuinely mad. Like, where with these people do you draw the line when everything
Right.
they do is just to get on another show?
Right. Yeah. And this is where I had mentioned earlier, I had tweeted this and, then Andy stole it, going back in time, because this whole exchange really showed how, the two different worlds here. Dan just playing a game. Phaedra took it personally. I, of course, side with Dan's view. But I understand not everyone sets aside their emotions. They should, but they don't. Phaedra really got too personal. And again, it comes back. How would she feel if every player she took out of the game had this attitude towards her?
Yeah. Like, Tamara's not allowed to have that response. And,
right.
And like, how is him turning on you in this game more personal and nasty than you calling him a low-down son of a bitch and a piece of shit?
Yeah. So, and not to mention she lied to Sheree the entire game.
Yeah.
That's okay. Murdering Tamara is okay. I mean, in the game. But, I would have liked to see Andy bring that up. Like,
yes.
Okay, Tamara, you've seen how Phaedra reacted to Dan. How do you feel? Call them out. Let's see. Now, that would have been, putting the pressure on Tamara to react to it. But it would also have put the pressure on Phaedra, because if Tamara had said, well, I understand and I'm over it, then Phaedra really looks bad. For not.
Oh, Phaedra, remember when you got kicked off Housewives because you spread a vicious rumor that your best friend had a sexual assault dungeon? Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You are a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. In this show, she was doing really well at one point, it seemed. But yeah, she has a history of these issues. And so for her to get all pissy at Dan for a game was just ridiculous. And I have to say, this whole exchange, not to mention me tweeting about it, has caused a lot of debate and argument online. And I think a lot of it may have to do with the culture, not just of the players, but where they come from. People who were already fans of the Housewives, of course, stan culture. They stan the Housewives. They must defend them. They must go to those Twitter streets and defend them against the evil people like me who say that, or like you, has happened previously. When I'm out there emphasizing it's a game, it's surprising when people like that are doing the things Phaedra did.
And don't get me wrong, like I have lines that I won't cross in a game, and I get cross when other people, cross those lines as well. Dan, like, turning on Phaedra because that was the best thing he felt to do for his game in that moment is so far from crossing the line.
Yeah.
It's not even worth talking about. And when you compare it to, again, a line I would be comfortable crossing, Phaedra lying to her best friends, voting one of her friends out of the game, or like choosing to murder one of her friends earlier in the game. Like, I don't see anything that Dan did that was any worse than what Phaedra did. Yeah. And no one's going to call Phaedra out for that.
Right. And meanwhile, we have her defenders online, calling people like me names and things like that. Now, luckily, there have been a relative few compared to the people who actually want to discuss. But I blocked 10 people, or at least 10 accounts. I can't say they were all people. Because they couldn't be civil and they just started attacking me for stupid reasons. One of them was like, F you, Bloomberg. And then I was like, okay, why are you personally attacking me? And he's like, I didn't personally attack you. I'm like, what do you consider, if you don't consider F you, Bloomberg, and he of course spelled it out, to be a personal attack, then you're worse than I thought. He's like, well, I think it's more of an insult than a personal attack. And it's like, oh, good. Let's debate just what type of an a-hole you are. That sounds like fun. And I can't, if I told that story on the finale recap, I'm sorry. I couldn't remember if I told Matthew that off camera or off the podcast or on the podcast, but
that's so funny.
That was just one of them. But yeah, like I said, I sometimes I'll respond to people, but this got bad enough that I just started blocking them, and it was like, dink, 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 you're gone. So yeah, it's pathetic when people act that way.
It's unhinged behavior.
Yeah. All right, but we move on. MJ and John, this is the part you were talking about earlier, talk about why Dan's game failed, and they're right. MJ acts like he's trying to blame Phaedra, but he didn't say that. He took responsibility for his mistakes. He was just surprised at her reaction now. And of course, this, I think, is when what you had said about John comes into play. Peter adds that Phaedra cast some suspicion on herself by using the term bloodhound to describe him after Parvati had done so in a one-on-one conversation a day earlier. So this was an actual interesting thing. So this also plays into, like Sandra had said and other people had said, nobody suspected Phaedra before Dan brought up her name. Okay.
Well, he asked them to rate. I thought this was interesting because when Andy asked who to raise their hand, who was suspicious of Phaedra before Dan, Sandra was one of the people who put her hand up.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were suspicions there. And even if it wasn't before this, I think Peter said this happened the day after or something like that. So it didn't take long one way or the other. And this is very similar to something that happened on UK Traitors, where someone had a conversation. One of the traitors had a conversation with someone, relayed it to the other traitor, and then that traitor went back and told the person. And so the person's like, why would those two be talking about that? That's very interesting. So something as traitors to remember is, careful the words you use, because people will figure it out. There's discussion of the Berge shield and murder attempt, and everyone agrees it was a big mistake by Dan. We kind of talked about that already, and people have heard me talk about it enough on previous podcasts, unless you have something to add.
No, I don't think we need to dissect all the things Dan wrong did anymore. It's been talked about to death.
Yes. Andy says, fans said Dan's fatal mistake was going after Phaedra. I don't know who those fans are, but let me just say they're wrong. He made a lot of mistakes. He was doomed before he ever went after her. I have discussed it before. Going after her was a Hail Mary. You only throw a Hail Mary if you're already losing.
Yeah.
And so, that was not what did it. I know that was the TV moment that did it, but that was not what actually did it. At one point, Sandra tells Phaedra she wishes she'd been the recruit. And then later she ends up asking Parvati why she didn't recruit her. Sandra really wanted to be a traitor.
I know, poor Sandra.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen her up there because
Yes.
she would have absolutely nailed it. But look, it sounded like everyone thought that she was an obvious pick to be a traitor
Right.
anyway. Knowing how good she is, she could have probably still pulled it off. But as someone who always backs the faithful, it was personally very satisfying getting to see someone as good as Sandra really
Yes.
nail that role.
Yeah. And at one point, like I think early in the season, I believe Matthew asked me, or maybe it was a listener asked me, do you want the traitors to win or do you want the faithful to win? And I say, I want a good player to win. It's not a matter
Yes.
of which role they play. It's I want a good player to win.
Yes. And we don't get a lot of good players on the faithful, so it was nice for them
Yes.
to throw us a
Yes.
Sandra bone.
Yeah. And this actually leads to it's finally time to get to the winners. CT and Trishelle. John congratulates them and people applaud, but MJ is still pissy, claiming
Ugh.
that even Alan didn't enjoy the ending. Okay, she says this. I immediately then went to the ending and took a clip of it. I posted this on Twitter, but I'm also going to post it as a TikTok because there is no way anyone could look at Alan and think he did not enjoy it. He was smiling and laughing and loving every minute of it. So, MJ, you're just delusional at this point. If
You
that's
are.
truly
Delulu, salty, worse than bananas.
yeah. So,
Go do some
uh,
meditation.
yeah, they ignore her for the moment as Andy
Yes.
asks how it felt. Trishelle says they've known each other forever. It's been very brother and sister, even though they've had their ups and downs. Um, Most players say Trishelle played the best game. I could see why they'd say that. And she did do pretty well. But as I mentioned on the finale podcast, now this will be your first time hearing it, but she had the CT advantage. I don't know that she could have won without having her strong number one, number two in there. And it's a problem. It is a fault in the Peacock US version of the game. When you cast this many reality stars, some of them are going to have relationships. You had Sheree and Phaedra. You had CT and Trishelle, not to mention Johnny Bananas. He just got knocked out early. You had, in theory, Janelle and Dan. In theory, Sandra and Parvati. There were all these different people such that it's really difficult to knock out all the duos, which you needed to do. And had Kate had an active strategic brain cell, that's why she would have taken out Trishelle. But she didn't. She left a strong duo in there who was always, I know they had a hiccup at the end. I know Trishelle had a moment of doubt. But Dan, and I'm sorry for people who listen to the finale recap and you're like, oh, okay, he's repeating himself. Dan didn't convince Trishelle based on the game they played. Not Dan, CT didn't convince Trishelle based on the game they played. CT convinced Trishelle based on their shared history.
Yeah.
And so, I do think Trishelle played a good game, but she had a extra advantage there.
Correct. I think it shouldn't be controversial at all to say that Sandra played the best game a game of Faithfuls and Traitors. I think she played the game that most consistently gets her to the end.
Yes.
I still enjoy Trishelle as a winner because I think it was a novel way of getting to the end and a fun way of getting to the end that we haven't seen. I thought CT, I enjoyed seeing T as a winner because I think he played a good version of the two where he was a traitor's pet and then flipped and became aggressive, but still had enough relationships to be able to pull that off. So I'm very comfortable with a Trishelle CT win.
Yeah.
I think that they both were great, but I do think that it's Sandra's game that was the most strategic and most consistent in terms of win equity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly happy with them winning, but just, we have to look at it objectively also to say, okay, this is some of the things, they played the game they were given.
Yes.
And it's not their fault that they were cast together. They use that to their advantage, which they should.
And you mean, look at the Housewives. There were five or
Right.
six of them.
Right.
That was that
Exactly.
advantage 10 times over, and they
Right.
couldn't make it work.
Yes, exactly.
I'm not a
Andy,
Housewives hater. I enjoy the Housewives. Just an FYI, Housewife fans. I like the Housewives. I just don't think they're good at competition reality games. They're great TV, just not good at the game, and that's what we're dissecting.
that's right. That's right. Andy asks what the final four wanted at the end. MJ says, obviously, go to the end with faithfuls. Long, awkward silence. After Kate briefly talks, Trishelle says she obviously wanted to go to the end with the faithfuls as well, but she was second guessing herself the whole time. Trishelle asks MJ, why are you still so mad at me? Now, my initial guess is like a little under 70 grand might have something to do with it. But then this goes on, and we'll get to that in a minute. But she says she's not coming for Trishelle. CT was the chump. But Trishelle points out MJ blocked her on Instagram, so she's clearly pissed. Several others kind of mock the seriousness of an Instagram blocking, but she says, I blocked you immediately. Why wouldn't I? So it's so petty. Yeah, I mean, it's just CT is asked.
In fairness, without the Housewives, this would have been a very dry reunion. We could have had what we had kind of last year, where it was just the bitter Bettys at the end crying about Cirie. At least the Housewives threw a bit of color on their sex.
Well, there were just a variety of bitter Bettys.
Exactly. No, this is my last minute pandering to the Housewife fans, David. Let me roll.
Okay, go for it. CT is asked why he didn't end the game after Kate was gone. He says he just didn't trust anyone other than Trishelle, and he thought MJ could be the mastermind, which makes me snort with laughter.
Yeah.
Andy asks MJ why she didn't vote CT that final time, and she says it wasn't about the money, it was about loyalty. So I guess my earlier answer to the money must be wrong, and she's just pissed for reasons. I don't know. Also, I checked. MJ's net worth, according to several websites, is around $5 million. So, yeah, she's probably right that the money didn't mean anything to her. If I had $5 million sitting around, I wouldn't necessarily be that pissy over this amount.
Also, according to Trishelle's exit interview, she had told MJ before going into the final fire pit that she only trusted MJ and that she wanted to go to the end, the two of them. So when she voted CT there, I think she was expecting MJ to do the same thing. MJ actually flipped on Trishelle first, voted for her at the Kate. Anyway, we're getting into the game now rather than the reunion show. This is all to say, MJ, it's your own damn fault.
Yes. So, but the other thing is, I if I were CT and Trishelle, I would not feel terribly bad. I'd be like, kind of like when Cirie took out Ari last season. It's like, you're a multimillionaire, you'll live. MJ says she doesn't regret her choices. She regrets their choices. Okay. This is where John actually does something good. He jumps in to say, but he's also narrating what Trishelle has done. He says Trishelle seems taken aback by how bitter MJ is. And then he says, and you shouldn't be bitter about it. It's a game, end of.
I love John.
Yeah. In that moment, that was funny from John. And so, MJ says the traitors were eliminated and the greedy people decided to make it a different game. It's like, no, it's always been that game, MJ. You just have never understood the game. You fell for the propaganda about it being faithful versus traitors. Don't blame other people for that. Plus, I have to say this. Anyone, because I've seen this online too. People are like, oh, they were greedy, just following what MJ said. They weren't greedy. They didn't even know. I mean, that they were doing this. You could tell by what happened. This was not some elaborate show they put on to make it a 1-1-1 tie. They didn't know how she was going to vote. So it's stupid to say that they did this out of greed. But here's the other thing. If they did it out of quote unquote greed, it's called winning a game.
Yeah.
Does everybody who wins Survivor by cutting someone doing it out of greed? No, they're winning the game. So even if they had, if they had done it out of greed, I would have liked them to say, we're getting rid of her because we just want to split the money amongst ourselves. But they didn't, because that wasn't the reason.
No,
And
I'm with you.
So get off it, MJ.
I wonder, I was thinking about this. It was a shower thought, though not a very deep one. If we get so much more of this hostility and bitterness in the Traitors because there's no jury, and the fact that the bitter Bettys don't get to feel like they have their final say,
right,
and their stamp of approval on the winner. So therefore, there's no kind of closure for them.
I feel like I've discussed that.
Yeah.
Somewhere, someone else brought that up, that in season 1, but it's such a vague memory that I don't remember exactly what I said. Maybe I'll have to go back to listen to the podcasts from then. But it is an interesting, a very interesting shower thought, because this is their only time. They didn't get to vote against them, but it also that's what makes it a different game from Survivor.
Yeah.
You don't have to convince the jurors. You could do anything you want to the people who are gone. So be it.
Yes.
And that's what makes it a different game. The only people you have to convince are the people who are still in the game.
And I'm not advocating for a jury. I like this format.
Yeah.
I just wonder if that, and it's a bit like how whenever we see the faithful win, it's this really joyous, ecstatic moment you get to share with another person, which, that's how I always imagined myself winning, like sharing in it with somebody else. And when you juxtapose that against the intense loneliness of a traitor win, I don't know, like it's part of what I love about this game. And I think you have to deal with the fact that whether you win as a faithful or a traitor, the people who you left behind, who never got the closure, who never got a say, are going to carry that grudge. And you know what? I'm going to go cry into my pile of cash.
Yes. Pile of gold. Or in your case, silver. It would have been. So they keep similar to this discussion. Janelle says they play games and they don't take it personally. So I guess we're just pretending that the stuff with Johnny Bananas didn't happen at the beginning of the
show. Bloody bananas.
Yeah. But, CT adds, they've done it for so long, they're kind of numb to it. And it's MJ's first competition show. So again, he's trying to be understanding here. And Dan chimes in that he feels the same way about Phaedra and he really likes her, but doesn't know where she stands or he stands with her after it all. Will she still be mad at him? And she clarifies that yes, she will be. This is where the whole cultural difference thing that we talked about earlier. Andy says, that this difference between the gaming shows and the others. And he also notes that Parvati had pointed out, I mean, many of us have pointed this out over time. The name of the show is The Traitors. It's not called The Faithful. It's not called The Honest People. It's not called it's The Traitors. And some people get it into their head that they're a faithful, so that means they're playing a different game. No, the faithful still have to, as you well know, they have to lie. They have to scheme. So, yeah.
Honey, you turned up, you got your TV time. Now you're going to have to cop a few tears.
Yeah.
You said you were only going there to be on TV. So let's not all get our feelings hurt that we didn't win the game you weren't trying to win anyway.
Yes. So, that pretty much wraps things up. Some of the non-gamers plus bananas are still going away pissy. I'm actually surprised we haven't seen them sniping at each other on social media already, or maybe they have been, and I'm just so far behind because I've been working on podcasts all day. I don't know. I don't know if you can shed any light on that or if they've stayed pretty mum on that.
I don't listen to Tamara's podcast and I don't listen to Banana's podcast either. So
good choices, I suspect.
I'm sure all the drama's going down there and I will not be participating.
Yeah. All right. Do you have anything else to add about the reunion episode?
No, Look, I enjoyed it. Again, it could have done with it being about half an hour shorter than it was. But I felt like this was good closure for me. I love a reunion. I love getting to see where everyone is sitting with each other now. And getting to celebrate CT and Trishelle and actually having people on their side was refreshing after last year.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, then before we finish things up, where can people find you, not to drag you, to agree with you, and to tell you how awesome you are?
I only perceive compliments. So you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at AnnabelleCE. You can also find me over at the Babes on the Brink podcast with Chili Philly from Australian Survivor, where we're chatting the Traitors, we're chatting Australian Survivor, and who knows what we'll get up to in the Traitors off season. How about you, David?
Oh, well, I am everywhere. For anyone who wants to let me know what they think. I mentioned at the top of the podcast, if you haven't, heard from me about something, then you're just not trying very hard. And so, yes, I'm all over social media and reality TV podcasting, with U.S. Survivor having just restarted. I'm back on the Rob Has Podcast Network with my Why Blank Lost Survivor. I recorded that immediately before we recorded this one, so it will definitely be out by the time this one is posted. And you can also find all of my various accounts through my Linktree at Linktree/David Bloomberg with a dot before the EE and Linktree in the URL. Or more directly, you can find me on most tech-based social media like Twitter and Blue Sky is at David Bloomberg, and on the video platforms TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram is at David Bloomberg TV. Because Threads is connected to Instagram, I'm at David Bloomberg TV there as well. And of course, on those video platforms, I've been posting 3 or 4 reality TV videos each day. Of course, Traitors US has been a major part of that, and I have. As I mentioned, as I was watching, I was grabbing clips. So I have clips to last for a little while, probably long beyond audience interest, but I'll still keep posting them. Also, of course, U.S. Survivor. For Australian Survivor, I have clips and my mini Why Blank Lost videos, and some other different shows, like an occasional one from Deal or No Deal Island, and whatever other shows catch my fancy.
David's a good follow on TikTok. I recommend.
Thank you. All right. It is time to finish our Traitor game.
Ooh. Ah.
So, Annabelle, did you lie to me?
I did lie to you. I lied very early. I'm not sure if it was too early.
Oh, uh-oh. Did you lie to me before the game started?
I lied to you before the game started.
You're the second person to do that.
Okay, I'm so bad. I lied before the game started, and then I completely forgot to look out for your lie. So I wasn't consciously listening for a lie, but I have an idea to submit for what your lie was. Every time I come on the Traitor, I cook the Traitor game so hard.
So let's see here. Well, it's funny because I did not catch anything that you lied about, but it's funny because I was only listening after I started the game. So we're going to have to call you a technical knockout there. But so the lie before the game started, what did you say? I have no idea. I wasn't paying enough.
I said I was cat sitting across the road.
Oh, you did.
Which I'm not.
Yes.
I'm allergic to cats, but I am dog sitting.
I almost said something about that because I know, of course, you have a dog, and I almost asked you how the dog liked the fact that you were cat sitting. So,
was your lie about the interaction that you had on Twitter with the guy saying "fuck you, Bloomberg"?
No, it was not. That was real, but you're close.
Oh, what was it?
I only blocked him. I did not block 10 people's.
Okay, all right.
So it was close.
All right.
Now after this, I may go and find more people to block. But yeah, he was the only one that I have blocked so far.
I personally love a solid mute. That way they don't get the satisfaction of seeing that I cared enough to blog.
Oh, I want them to see that I blocked them. As a matter of fact, I told him what I do sometimes with people like this is I will respond to them and say, now I'm done with you. I am waiting enough time for you to see this, and then I will be blocking you. And
That's amazing.
So it's just,
I love it.
I'm letting you know exactly why, because some of these people, now this guy had 3 followers, so I don't care what he says about me behind his closed doors. But some people, if you just block them, they'll be like, oh, he blocked me because, and then they'll make up some reason that's favorable to them. So I like explaining this is exactly why. Now, that doesn't stop them from lying about it to their followers or whoever else, but sometimes people come in and they're like, hey, this guy's over here talking about you, and it's like, most of the time.
David is the bananas of the Twitter fan community.
I'm not bitter. I'm not pissy about things. Just don't come at me with your, insults and then pretend you didn't insult me. So
I'm living for it.
Yes. So as we wrap up here, everyone should make sure to check out the accounts for this podcast overall. You can find us on Instagram at the Traitor Podcast, on Twitter as at the Traitor Pod. You can email the Traitor Podcast at gmail.com. And of course, if you'd like to help support the cost of publishing this podcast, you can drop Matthew a few bucks at coffee.com. That's ko-fi.com/Matthew Keeley. As Matthew and I discussed on the finale recap, Matthew and I will be doing one more podcast, kind of a season wrap up, to help make up for the fact that he couldn't be here with us. And also, if people want to send in questions, they can send them in to any of those accounts I just mentioned, or to my Twitter account, or to my Blue Sky or Threads account, and just, make sure you're labeling it as a question for the podcast, because sometimes people will send me questions and I'll just answer them without realizing, oh, I was supposed to wait for the podcast. And so we'll kind of do sometime during the week here, we will do a wrap up and a fan Q&A type situation. So watch for that. And, until then, I think we're done unless you have anything else.
No, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, David.
Yes, and thank you. You are, as I said, amazing as always, and you are always welcome back. So, so thank you everyone for listening, and we will talk to you soon. So remember, everyone, stay traitorous. Bye.
Bye.